What's up, everyone? Steven Perva here from 7 Nines, and I am thrilled to introduce to you an event that was brought to me by my friend and mentor, Frank DiGilio. Now, chances are, if you're in the mainframe space already, you've heard of Frank from the Terminal Talk podcast he co-hosts with Jeff Bisty. If you haven't heard that podcast, I'm going to leave a link in the description below so that you can check that out. Outside of being a famous co-host of a podcast, Frank is a distinguished engineer and the CTO for declunkification at IBM. For quite some time now, Frank has hosted internal discussions so IBMers can help try to solve problems that affect the IBM Z industry. Shortly ago, Frank came to me and asked if the System Z enthusiast Discord community would be interested in hosting these conversations as well. So I jumped at that opportunity so that people from across the globe and from different companies all over can weigh in on these topics as well. What you're about to see is our March 29th of 2024 recording where we talked about platform simplification. We had opinions from all over the spectrum of experience and from tons of different companies across the globe. I would love it if you could join us at our next water cooler event by checking out the link to the System Z enthusiast Discord community in the description of this video, or just go to discord.gg/SZE to join us. And to stay tapped into all the latest and greatest going on at 7 Nines in the System Z enthusiast community, subscribe to this channel, and I hope you enjoy the recording. Take care. All right, I'm going to start. Is that cool with you, Frank?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. Welcome, everybody, to the second Z Rebels Technical Water Cooler. This event aspires to be a bi-monthly, that's twice a month, conversation for the System Z enthusiast community. The goal of this conversation is for the collaborative minds of mainframers around the world, like yourselves, to take on industry-impacting issues with the intent to share ideas, share challenges, and ultimately collaborate on where the industry needs to go. So before we get started, let me be the first to remind you of the rules of the Discord community here. If you're not familiar with them, you can always go to the Welcome and Rules channel under the information category. But most importantly, I want to call out a few rules that are pretty pertinent to this conversation. The general sentiment of mutual respect. Please don't disrespect other people in the chat or on voice. There's no tolerance for discriminatory statements on things like race, age, gender, disability, etc. Our rule on elitism is particularly applicable here. Please don't insult or belittle other people based on their opinions or their preferences. Don't share any information that you're not able to share. That's things like intellectual property, topics that you're under NDA, and any other bits that you might not have permission to share definitely shouldn't be discussed in this forum. And finally, it's really important to remember that everybody here, unless they specifically say so, is simply just an individual that may or may not work at some organization. Their views don't constitute the views of that organization that they work for and are just their own views. Next is a topic of recording. This conversation is going to be recorded for easier consumption for people who might not be able to partake in our early morning time slot or late evening for some folks. And this is going to be probably posted publicly, and I'll let you know where that recording is later. So if you don't want to be a part of that recording, now is a great time for you to either obscure your identity by right-clicking on the community and changing your nickname, making sure your camera's turned off or covered by a piece of tape or something. You could change your voice to sound anonymous if you'd like, or just outright leave the event. This conversation is all about you, your thoughts, and your topics. No topic is too basic nor too advanced, too big nor too small, and ultimately participation from all of us decides what topics are discussed. My only ask is that we all try our best to be problem solvers and not simply problem identifiers. The format of this water cooler is going to go like this. Anyone and everyone is welcome to bring a topic to the table for discussion. In a moment, we're going to open the floor to someone to bring up our first topic, or I'll have Frank say something if you're all being too shy, and we'll start talking about it. If there's something you want to talk about, you're free to post it in the chat, which you can get to by clicking or tapping the little chat icon. It looks like a little chat bubble somewhere, or you can raise your hand. There should be a hand somewhere, and we'll bring you up on stage to share your thoughts. We ask that once you've shared your thoughts on the topic and you don't really have much else to say, there should be a way to kind of leave the stage and step down without leaving the whole event. And if you decide you have something you want to add later, just put your hand back up and we'll pull you right back in. You don't have to have video to participate. Frank and I are just kind of doing that. That's totally up to you. But if you do want to speak, you're definitely going to need a microphone. And if you're not cool with using your microphone, just type into the chat. And if you want us to read it out loud, maybe make it bold or let us know that you want us to read it. If not, if the discussion isn't too lively, we might read that anyway. It just depends on how chaotic this is all is. With all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Frank to either kick us off or add anything I may have forgotten. But thanks for joining us today, and hopefully you'll enjoy the conversation. And thank you, Frank, for bringing this idea to the table so that we can all partake in that. Frank?
No, thanks, Steve. I really appreciate it, and thank you very much for hosting this event. I like this idea of giving people the opportunity to talk and ask questions. So it'd be great to start if there's anybody who has any question that's been bugging them for a while. The silence is deafening. All right, if nobody has anything they want to bring up, Steve and I were talking a little bit about what we should do if nobody says anything, and so let me start with a question to the crowd. This year, IBM is really going to be focusing on simplifying IBM Z, specifically ZOS. So, what would simplification of ZOS mean to you? Anyone? Come on, there's plenty of people here who've got opinions on things.
All right, we got a couple hands coming up. Let's bring some people up. All right, we got 2 people. Someone has to find the mute button. Go.
Oh, look at it, Mike and I both. That's awesome.
Yeah. So simplification would be like, okay, define the tasks and then automate the tasks. So it's like, what are the tasks? Is it storage management? Is it software maintenance? What are the tasks? So like as system programmer, we'd have to figure that out. What's going to get us the most for our money, you know?
And I agree with Mike. I think it also should be that we basically use the DevOps principles or some type of principles to make the job easier to maintain and build ZOS.
Remove all the differences.
Yeah, consistency would be huge.
Yeah, that's a good one, Rosalind. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, just remove the differences that don't matter. I mean, Z has a lot of value, so I'm not saying remove the differences that make Z just like any other box, but remove the differences that serve no purpose.
We actually had a discussion about differences. What was it, a couple days ago maybe, where we were talking about the difference of, well, how can I allocate a data set using JCL with kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, as opposed to cylinders and tracks. And I think that was a pretty controversial topic for a hot minute. And the question was, should JCL support the allocation in kilobytes, megabytes, or gigabytes, or should it stick with cils and tracks and people do the mental gymnastics to come up with that?
Allocation should basically be, I just want to write data. I don't want to have to know all of the, Rec FM, all the other stuff that you have to do to allocate. I just want to write data. Let me write data.
Well,
that would be huge. That.
I'll go a step further, right? Because, I'm just gonna be honest. Unix kind of stuff is a solved problem for forever. You don't allocate a Unix file system with megabytes or gigabytes. You just allocate a file system, and it just does what its thing, right? So you just keep piling on. So why are we even discussing megabytes or gigabytes? We should have it so we don't have to deal with that to begin with, right? It should just be another file system.
So what happens when that file system starts to get close to full?
Maybe we should allocate more space, right? And here's another thing, right? So even in Unix file systems, you can run out of disk space, right? This isn't like a new concept. If that happens, you can either expand to another file system, or this is a limitation that I feel like we're putting on ourselves. But we don't need to have that limitation, right?
Right. Do you see that though? What I'm trying to get my arms around, because I agree with you. I'd love to have it just automatically grow, right? But what would that mean in our environment? Automatically grow.
That would mean that system managed storage actually system managed storage. Yes.
So Mike, is that a capability that's already there, or is this
No,
added?
that's a capability. Like, okay, what I was thinking about, like a VTOC. Okay, a VTOC should be treated like a data set that has multiple extents. So if you did that, because that's usually the thing. Like the VTOC is where all the data sets reside. So if that thing could grow as your data grows, that would be system managed storage. So you never even have to see it. It just grows. As long as you're able to expand your storage, it just expands as your data expands. And the system manages that. The system programmer doesn't manage that. The system manages it.
Well, and you also have to you think about it from a system point of view. ZOS manages the allocations, but it also has a redundancy where the ZOS does the allocation and so does the DS8K. So there's a lot of things that are core to ZOS that would have to change in order to support something like that. But I don't see why we shouldn't. Why shouldn't we take and allow? Okay, I need space. I need to write this data set. However, since there's a lot of shared environments, it's going to be difficult to put that into ZOS and have that managed at that level because of the way things are done. But you'd have to look at the fundamentals under the covers a little bit, I think. But I don't see why. I don't think it's a problem. I just think it's going to have to be. We should have a long-term goal of what we want to do with it, of how it should look like. And one thing was suggested a while back from a customer was, why do we have to have volumes? Or why do we have to have UCBs? Why do we have to have those type of technologies when is it necessary anymore, or is it not? So just throwing it out there.
Yeah, that's why I say remove the differences that don't matter and figure out how to abstract up. To some extent, there may be a level at which I do have to define this is the amount of storage. I define this is the amount of disk space I get. So, I'm putting a volume on whatever. But we need to think about should the user care about? And how do we make that as simple and as less different as possible?
You're right. I mean, on Linux, we allocate LUNs in Linux world. We should do the same type of thing to allocate the disk space on even a storage pool. Have that be a storage pool that is assigned maybe to an application. You can limit the exposure to other things in the system. So,
But do you think that I could use some of these limitations to my advantage if I'm trying to have a kind of a shared environment, being able to say, this is how much space you get, and that's how much space you get, as opposed to just let it grow and grow and grow, right?
So there's a difference between a file system and a data set.
True.
And so having me to define a data set specifically is a pain in the why. Having to define that this thing gets this much space is like any other world. I only give you this much space. I don't necessarily have a problem with this is how much space you have. I have a problem with this is how much space you have for this particular file and this particular file and this particular file.
Fair enough.
I mean, you could take the storage group definitions and give it to an application and let the application say, here's how much space this application is allowed to have. And then you can go from there. And we have technology that has been around since the beginning of time for mainframe. Is it appropriate now to still have those technologies, or do we need to break down those barriers and allow it to be different?
We had a couple
Chad,
people.
do you have an opinion?
Yeah, we had a couple people join up. Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, sorry, Frank. Your question actually prompted an interesting memory for me, and that was, in the days of yore, we used to do, system capacity planning and application capacity planning, and one of the things was you did give things rails like that, so that when it did go off the rails because of some bug or some unexpected behavior, it didn't take down the system. So, I know we don't tend to think like that in today's workloads, but I think there is a case or, a situation where some of those limitations were used to good effect in the past.
Yeah, what I've been trying to get in here, but the dogs have been in the way, is that, and Rosalind's picked this up. Rosalind, sorry, has picked this on this, is that we need a layer of abstraction, because the topic as it went the other day was more along, okay, why can't we do it in megabytes and gigabytes and allocate, or even considering why even allocate. And we need that abstraction at I'll say you have the developer's view of the world where they're just trying to test something, and they could accidentally go out and blow out an entire file storage area, to kind of even put a generalization on it. But you're right. Why should the application programmer have to figure out how much space I'm going to need? And then you do have the view of more of actually the storage administrator. There is, that position exists in the distributed world, but they obviously are tackling things very differently. But they're the ones that are sitting there saying, okay, I've got this RAID box with a bunch of no longer spinning disk drives in it, and we need more storage. Let's just activate a few that we haven't had online yet. Deep inside, really the only people that are concerned about good old things like MBBCCHHR are the ones that are working at the IO level. And we've got enough ability these days to abstract that part of it away from the rest of our user community. As I was sitting here, also somebody said, well, how can you actually allocate in megabytes, etc.? In JCL, you can say average rec equals 1, and then all your space requests are going to be in that megabyte thing. That's something people sometimes forget about, is that when you say give me a megabyte, it's also then multiplied by the average rec parameter. One of the unique things that we have in our data set world is the concept of the PDS and the PDSE. My most popular answer over on Stack Overflow it had to do with comparing PDS to zip files. And they're kind of the same, but they're also kind of different. And the thing with the zip files, it's truly an archive, and you have to actually pull stuff out of there. We do have the ability to refer to an individual member in many places, which makes things a little bit easier in that respect. Windows has kind of abstracted that with the ability to use a zip file, or as they call it, a cabinet file in in a location, and then underneath it you can address it the same way. And maybe DSFS is bringing that to our world in Unix. But I think really we need to obfuscate the hardware parts of it from everybody but us deep tinkerers. Will definitely make things easier. And if someone is offline, can do a search. I'd be curious to see if there are any IBM ideas on that are open as far as improving the allocation and dealing with data sets in JCL. And I'll leave with this final note. Even Fred Brooks thought JCL was a huge mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
Right.
sorry about the rambling.
I think a PDS could be very similar to how the Unix directory structure looks. it's very similar in the concept wise.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
DFS,
to me,
yeah, and that's what DSFS does give that ability.
right. I mean,
So
we don't have anything really unique as far as data structures. I mean, we have a little bit with the VSAM and stuff has a little bit different, but um, it's still a file structure with an index. So if we can abstract those layers and not worry about the infrastructure or the hardware behind it or the structures behind it, I think we can make the platform much easier for a new person to evaluate. Or we have to figure out how to get these training into more schools or make it more available so people can learn it better. I don't know.
so former PDSC guy here. Just like to make a minor point that with its inception, and the same could be said of SMS and a lot of the SMS required data set types like extended format. Those the plan for those was really to be a layer of abstraction that was over, PDSs. Well, not specifically over PDSs, but over how you interacted with the data before. I think one of the unfortunate things was that we were quick to adhere to the old APIs, and instead of actually having newer APIs and newer mechanisms that took advantage of the fact that this data was now being managed by the system instead of directly by the users.
I just wanted to chime in on the prior point mentioned about it was kind of talked about, trying to like maybe offload some of these storage ideas from like Unix system services to different programs and such. And I'm still new. I'm pretty green in the mainframe space. I've only been around, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And again, I still feel really new relative to the people around me. And again, someone had just mentioned about training people better. And I worry, and this is just a comment more or less, I worry that if you institute programs or API or like not APIs, but programs per se, and like in a way to like change the ways or not change the ways the OS functions, but how you interact with it. I worry that individuals that use those types of programs, they won't understand how it works in the background. I feel like the information that you gain from learning how it functions, it might not be valuable in the moment. It might just, you might save a lot of time using those types of programs that developers can create for like types of like storage allocation, etc., and all that stuff. I just worry that you get blind to the fact of how it works in the background. So like I work with a lot of like VTAM stuff and mainframe networking. And I just recently learned about, there was a, God, what was the name of that program? I can't remember, but it's a program that you can use. It's like a web interface in order to generate pageant policies. And I was discussing with a coworker about it, and I was like, well, that's pretty neat, and he brought up a couple good points, how it kind of ties in that same thing I just mentioned, where you can go through this program that builds the policy for you, but at the end of the day, right, you know, let's say there's an issue with the policy later down the road, you're going to have, a bunch of people that don't quite, understand how to read a policy, look at a policy. So to that same point, you might end up with individuals that know how the program works, right, and know how to use it, but there may be background information that they won't have because they didn't understand how it works in the background. And that's something I worry about when I hear about, different ways to, maybe to increase efficiency in the mainframe in terms of like usability for things like this. And again, I'm green, I'm new. I haven't been doing it for 10, 15 years to understand, you know, how much better it could really be. This is just a thought, a thought from someone who is still learning.
And that's a good point, Mario. I mean, the idea here, in my mind at least, is what I want to do is create an environment that a lot of people can drive in, and that some of those drivers will be interested enough to become mechanics, right? I will still need people who really understand the the guts of the system and how it works. I just don't need everybody to be that person, right? And so what I want is to create an environment that lets everybody be a driver, and those people who really want to know more will become the mechanics. So if I flatten the learning curve, if I make it simple enough so that people can use it, um, then there will be people like you who go, well, this is great, but I really want to understand, how does this really work? And then there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to become that mechanic. What I want to do is maybe make it not so tough to be a mechanic either, right? Um, if I make it easier for you to understand what those different pieces are and get them to work together, that would be useful. And then the reason I push for this is I'd like to get to the point where there's a place where we can all get together and talk about stuff and help each other figure out how stuff works, so that, oh gee, I've been trying to set this policy up and I need help, and it's something that where we can support each other, right? IBM will say, we're going to build AI that's going to really understand, and yeah, bull, right? That's never going to happen, right? It'll be able to help some things. You'll be able to do some components that way, but you know how complex problems can turn up here, and how a bunch of different things can get in the way. So people are still going to be the best resource that we can rely on for solving a lot of these in-depth problems, and that is something that only a community of people can do, and that's really what I want.
To that point, I
I think there's one.
Go ahead, Rosalind.
I was going to say, I think there's one really good point there that's coming up in the chat and that you were talking about, which is we actually have to simplify ZOS, not put a layer on top of ZOS. And I really like that point of, and in some ways it is a layer on top of the physical hardware. That's okay. But we've got to be careful. The comment about when the tools are down, you can't do anything. We can't cause that kind of problem. We really have to make sure that we are simplifying the core without losing the value. And there are things that are complicated because they've always been that way. And I know the best thing about ZOS is that something that was compiled in 1960 still runs.
Right.
And the worst thing about ZOS is something that was compiled in 1960 still runs.
Yep.
So maybe we break that. You break me entirely, so I guess I don't want to say that. But we do have to think about, if you want to take advantage of these new things, it isn't the same anymore. That kind of thought process, maybe that's the way we think about it. I don't know. But we really, as a community, we need to understand how to make this simpler,
right,
at the core. And this is great. I have to leave early, unfortunately. Y'all enjoy.
Thanks, Rosalind. And thank you, Mario, for saying something. I know it's not easy for people to say they're new and then come up on this metaphysical stage here and say something. So I do think that that's amazing, and I appreciate that you participated in that way.
I agree. It's difficult for many people. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, you guys make it easy, and I appreciate that. You guys are very, very warm. So I appreciate that. I'll
Thank you.
now.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just gonna say, when Mario brought up policies, it kind of reminded me of something. This is just a very slight diversion, but Jez 2 implemented policies written in JSON a couple of releases back, and I was in a Tom Wasik presentation, and while I was listening to his what's new stuff, it suddenly hit me is that, okay, and Mario has touched on it. Okay, we import a policy into Jez 2. It can be modified on the fly, but there's no ability right now to export what Jez 2 thinks the policy is. And so I wrote up a couple of ideas that basically saying, one, we need to know where the policy came from, how, from where it was imported. And two, we need an ability to write it out in case somebody makes a change dynamically and doesn't update the data set. And the comment that either Tom or somebody else said was like, wow, why didn't we think of that? And that as much as was kind of a throwaway line, at the same time, it's like realizing is there's a lot of new wonderful stuff coming out from IBM, but I do wonder at times how much it's being thought out. I mean, to me, and again, this part of it too, because I've been a deep Jez 2 guy and I've been a sysprog and stuff. But if somebody wants to make a modification, I don't want to have to go back and look at the hard copy to see where it came from. And so I do kind of wonder, even though there's all this wonderful design thinking and personas and hills and stuff, are things being forgotten about? Like, hey, we can get stuff to and from the cloud there. And but is there something that we are missing or overlooked, or even worse, got pushed down on the stack in the interest of deliver now, fix crap later? And that, to me, has been a huge problem in our industry, especially, I'll say, even since the 80s, when this whole "what have you done for me" this quarter mentality became prevalent. But yeah, that's something, and I'm not singling out. All software vendors, whether it's mainframe or not, really need to think about to make sure they're covering, I'll say, more edge cases. Not a joke edge, but stuff that and I'm sure you came up with some during your work. So, but yeah, it's like the edge cases may not be so edge as you think.
Mhm.
And now I gotta go back to cleaning.
The concern I have about this mentality of let's make it work and then fix it later, like fix it appropriately later. First of all, I mean, that's not a new concept or a new issue, right? Like that's technical debt, like by definition. But the problem is that when you do that, you're not actually solving the problem. You're pushing it down the road further, right? So it's the real goal should be let's fix it correctly. It might take a little bit longer, but by fixing it correctly the first time, you're actually going faster than you would be if you did it the long road, right? So every time you do this, it just causes a further delay down the road. And while you're like, okay, whatever, I'll retire before that happens. That's fine. We're just screwing our own industry over by doing that, right? So it's how can we do this in a way that prevents us from causing more technical debt for anyone else that's involved, right?
Well, and I agree with you, Ray. I think we also need the new folks to take a look at what's going on and what's being promoted or being pushed out as new releases, and have them look at it and say, well, this doesn't make sense to me. How do you make it work for me? Because right now, if you have guys that are like my age or who know this stuff, they, oh, that's a problem, so let me go post it. We really want people who with a different point of view to see what's going on and get their input in there. We need people to speak up, like Steve and others start speaking up for this, because there's things that I ran into a long time ago that I pushed. When I see something, I speak up. But we really need the folks who say, I think Emma just posted it in the chat as well, and I didn't know what the concepts of were with what she was doing. So those are the kind of things we need people to speak up about, and those are the kind of things we need to have put into the product as far as vision or focus of where we want to go, along the same lines with megabytes and those kind of things.
Well, I don't disagree that the fact that we should, try not to create more technical debt in the long term. I find that if we wait for the inevitable, wheel to turn officially, we'll be waiting for extended periods of time. At the beginning of this call, I was on another commitment that, they were talking about something we had asked them to do, sadly more than 2 years ago. And we're sitting here waiting for the wheel to turn in the official way. I've created a lot of one-offs in my life, and what I found is that when I go back and revisit them, I create them better the next time. And that in itself, again, moves things forward. Make time to improve the process overall is the way I approach it. And then what we'll find is that beachhead that we claim, because we've now created a little bit of room to move, gives us a lot more flexibility to take things even further. If we're waiting for everybody to get in line, I think we're going to find ourselves waiting, unfortunately, a long time.
My only argument against this, because I actually do, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you in general, right, on that. But the one thing I would say though is, like, if you keep having this mentality of like, oh, it's a one-off, I'll just do it, whatever, and then I'll get it better the next time, is one-off solutions become permanent solutions, right? So they aren't like, it's not I did this one time and then it goes away. It's I did this one time and now it's going to be part of the code base for the rest of eternity, and then no one's going to understand how it works, right? So like, where's the fine line? Where's the balance in that? Is the part that I'm more concerned with, right? Do you see what I'm saying?
And it doesn't necessarily have to be a one-off, but I think Mike's point is a really important one. I have to be able to have some stuff that is thought through to a certain extent. And if we just wait until everything's all figured out, it just takes too long. And I need to provide some starting point that people can understand how a new technology or a new thing can provide some kind of support. If I don't take any chances, I won't get anywhere, right? So I need to I do want it to not be completely haphazard, but I also can't wait till the last possible I is dotted and T is crossed before I put something out, or else we won't get there.
Is this, are folks hearing me? Is this coming through okay?
Yep.
So I have a different viewpoint on a lot of this. To give you a little background, I came up in the 1970s. I've been a system programmer ever since then. And, there's a quote from Albert Einstein, or at least it's attributed to him. It is, everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. So what's different between now and the 70s? Well, back in the 70s, when I was first getting my arms around all this stuff, I attended IBM class after IBM class after IBM class, learning about the internals of ZOS, ZOS didn't exist. It was MVS 3.8 then. TIX, VTEM, NCP, you name it. I mean, we'd go through a class and people would lay out control blocks on the board, and at the end of the week or the 2 weeks, whatever it was, you knew how that system worked. Well, what's different between now and what existed then? One of the big things is IBM has killed all their education. You try to go to an IBM class now, they don't exist. Whatever's out there has been farmed out to third-party vendors, and some of it's pretty decent, but a lot of it's not. So, and golly gee, okay, we're getting complaints now that, oh gee, ZOS is too hard. We don't understand how it works. IBM, you killed all freaking education. What did you expect would happen? And we're talking about, well, we got to make it simpler. We got to make it simpler. Well, let's just quit pussyfooting around and let's kill ZOS and force everybody to run on Unix, and then maybe everybody will be happy. I have a problem with trying to take ZOS and make it look like every other Tory computer out there. It's already better. I mean, why would we take the premier operating system in the world and then hamstring it and kill it and make it where nobody has to know anything to use it? It's colleges and universities, everything's upside down right now. It used to be, back in my day, and I realize I'm old, universities taught what business wanted. You know, business says, okay, we're doing this, and here's what we're doing in the business world, here's what we need. And universities tailored their curriculum to that. Well, now it's completely upside down because universities have decided unilaterally that, oh, well, cloud is the way and Unix is the way and all this other stuff is the way. And now Java is the way. And now businesses are being forced to adapt to all that because that's the only thing universities are producing. You know, the kids that are graduating now don't know anything. So they have, you know, that's the workforce that's available. So businesses are being forced to adapt. You know, I get that ZOS is hard, but, you know, if you kill all the education, what do you expect? Yeah, I know that's probably going to be a very unpopular opinion, but that's my opinion. You know, I have a problem with taking what is already the best operating system platform in the entire world and trying to make it look like everything else. It's already better. Leave it alone. Bring the education back and teach people how to use it.
Actually, I've been on. So I've been on the education side with the committees that actually go out and talk to the businesses. And what's happened is the tech companies have been pushing the game for the past 3 decades. Java did not come from the universities. Java came from Sun. And that was kind of pushed on people. And what's happened is that this is what the businesses want the universities to teach. So it's not the universities driving the game anymore. It used to be the academic research side. You know, we look at the late Nicholas Wirth, did some absolute great stuff. Although Modula 2 for me is still a pain point. But it is the businesses that are driving what the universities are teaching. And I'll say at least IBM has made an effort. It's, in my humble opinion, it hasn't been a great effort, but they are at least getting some universities to teach. And we have people in the education world like Dr. C, and we have beautiful examples of Northern Illinois University sitting right here on this dais. And
I agree with
yeah,
you, Ray.
I just
we need to make it.
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say we need to make ZOS more available to be able to be taught. I mean, right now most people have to go out. I mean, there's perfect examples out there where they go get a Z machine, put it in their mom and dad's basement, and get it to work. So we know the needs out there. We need to make it so that ZOS is readily available to be taught in schools or learned on their own. That's where we're, and I agree with the education part, but we don't give them a place to learn it. You have to put in, you know, you have to, and for a college to teach it, you have to have the resources to be able to teach the class. You need the materials, you need the processors, you need them to play with it. Right now, there's only a few colleges that have that. We need to work on some of that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Learner's
It
edition.
needs to be runnable.
Learner's edition mess up.
Right, but still, you can't get it for a student in college. I mean, you only get it for like a couple of weeks. We need it available to them where they can play with it, destroy it, fix it, put it back together again, write stuff to it, and play with it. You know, teach it like a college course. Let them play with the system.
So here's my argument with this, right? So like if you hand somebody a Linux system, they don't have to go to college to learn how to use Linux, right? It is just part of a community, it's part of stuff. Now, do they know necessarily every bit and byte about Linux when they start using it? Absolutely not. So the question I have is why are we trying to make the assumption that everyone has to learn this before they start playing with it, right? Why can't we make this accessible in a way that so even like somebody onboarding that's new can play with certain little bits and pieces? They don't have to know the whole system, but in my opinion, the simplification means that we need to make it accessible so that anyone can start playing with it, right? It doesn't mean that they have to be an expert on it, but they have to be able to do something, right? And as they start going further along, they can do more things, but like they have to be able to do something.
And the other thing to note here is that I guess the way I see it, right? I mean, I guess, simplification can mean a lot of things, but it's not about hiding things from people necessarily, but just, for me, it's more about providing an interface that's easier to get at, right?
Yep.
3270 panels and JCL is it's difficult, especially for a lot of people coming out of college. But just to bring up a really simple example, right? Say I want to dump out an SMF record. Well, if I have to do it the JCL way, I got to set up this whole JCL thing and the DDs and all this stuff. And some of it, you don't even know, most of it, you might not even know what it means, but all it's doing is doing a hex dump for you. But, you have this really complicated looking JCL thing. Or, I brought this up several times already. Or, he's still, you want to look at an SMF record and understand the intricacies of it and what it looks like in a hex dump. Or, the ZOS Open Tools team, they made it so XXD, the little command line utility, can dump a data set for you, and you get a nice little hex dump with color formatting and everything. So it's not about hiding the complexity in the way things work for me, but more about providing the right, better interfaces to things, right? That's what it is to me.
And we
Yeah,
need
Leonard pretty
better
much.
documentation too. I mean, I came from the days when I had paper manuals sitting on a shelf, and then after that came Book Manager. And those two things, ever since that time, documentation has done nothing but go downhill. It's getting harder to use. It's harder to find stuff. I mean, in the days of the paper manual, if I wanted to know something, about a macro, a Kix macro, a system parameter, whatever, I'd pull out the reference book, hit the index, and then I would go directly to a section that told me every single parameter, a description of what they all did. And that was my primary learning tool. I could go through that and say, oh, hey, here's an option. This might be useful. And then it was left to me to decide which setting, which option, which parameter might be useful to me. Try to do that today. It's impossible. You try to do a search on a parameter or a macro or something, and you'll get 47,000 hits. None of them are anything to have anything to do with what you're actually looking for. And if you want to try to find a single place where there is an exhaustive reference of here's all the options, here's what they all do, here's everything that's available to you, it's impossible. You can't do it.
Yeah, so for me, that kind of comes down to like a search engine optimization issue, and one of the things I would really like to see more of, like, for example, I at least contributed one article, but I think it was Frank that started the Theropod articles. But today, right, the way people develop and find information is through the internet, and things need to be searchable on the internet today, because people don't keep a stack of books on their desk. That's, people use the internet to find things, and if you're just working in Python or C, C++, Linux, the search engines can pick that stuff up pretty well, but it's it has
The problem is there's no index. It's impossible for me to find the one place for a macro or a parameter or an option where I can see, okay, this is everything that's possible, and I have confidence that this is everything that's available to me, and I can pick and choose from what's there. But anymore, the way documentation is written, it's like people or the authors have tried to guess at, well, I think most people are probably going to want to do this, and then they give you a few cherry-picked examples of what they're thinking, but it's not exhaustive. It doesn't have everything, and it's not. They're trying to make it one size fits all, and it's not possible to do that, at least not accurately.
Hey, Bear, I grew up in the same time frame that you did, and I can tell you that, through search engines, what Leonard's talking about is right on point. It's about using the search engines properly to find what you're looking for. I don't have the struggles that you do. I do have some of those old paper manuals, and I'm thinking about how I'll sell them on eBay because I see people are getting some big dollars for that crap. But all the content is out there that you used to use, and even more that's available that you apparently are having some difficulty finding. Please, if you want to reach out, I'd be more than happy to, as brethren of a certain age group, I'd be more than happy to help you with that.
Okay, well, there needs to be documentation someplace that teaches people how to do that, if it's possible. I mean, I've looked around. I'm pretty stubborn when it comes to this stuff. I don't give up easily, and I've not been able to find the magic words to bend the search tools to my will to make them do what I want them to do. I just haven't been able to do that. And then the way they change it every other year, it's kind of rough.
I use the PDF files. I mean, I've got all the PDF files on my machine. Yeah, I'm from the same era.
Yeah,
and
that's what I do.
just
I go to PDF.
yeah, that's a PDF, which honestly is a lot, shelves don't break with PDFs. So,
it depends on the storage.
but yeah, and I'm going to say also search engines are using AI infusion now, and that's why they're worse.
Yeah. From what Leonard was talking about before, a lot of the training that you'd be looking at coming out of school is they teach you sometimes only the minimum, and they expect the students to go above and beyond to try to apply it and get the project set in, which, as you guys have already said, trying to get that done with Z is, I'll call it a high barrier to entry, just because of, well, we can't let them play with it, because if the wrong person does the wrong thing, everything cascades around. For the search stuff, I've been experiencing that. I'm relatively new to Z, only under 5, almost 6 years now. And for all the work that I've been doing, every time it's a question of not how do I search this up, it's who can I talk to within my team who's been dealing with this for 20 years, who can explain it to me better than I can find on my own.
Right.
Well, and sometimes, and this goes for anything. Sometimes, the documentation is not giving you exactly what you want, and I'm more on the development side of things, so obviously it's not always something you can do for like a system programmer type thing. But sometimes you just gotta, experiment with things. That's how you learn, right? And I think you guys were talking about that earlier, right? Just experiment and discover the behavior, right? And that's a lot of what my job is, right? Experiment and see what it does, right?
There's always got to be the group that does the experimentation to then write it down.
Yeah, I'll give you another example of the search tool. Messages. I'm used to, okay, if I get a message and I don't really know what it's trying to tell me, I'll do a search on the message number. And what I expect to find is, okay, here's a reference, here's what the message means, here's an expansion of all the things that can possibly cause this, and here are areas where you need to look. Well, anymore, somebody at some point had the bright idea that, we need to break the messages down by components. So you need to know the first 3 characters and go to that section and follow a trail of breadcrumbs. And if you're lucky, you'll finally get to the message. And 9 times out of 10, all it's going to say is, go ask your system programmer. Well, I am the freaking system programmer, and I have no idea what this message is trying to tell me. Come on, IBM, get with the program.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that more than once.
So we're at about 8 minutes left. I don't know, Frank, if you want to kind of open the floor for anybody to ask any questions, do any additional or final thoughts or anything like that. But I figured this might be an opportune time for people who haven't had a chance to speak to bring something up if they want to just make a point, ask a question to a seasoned group of folks, or even just bring their own perspective to the table that hasn't been heard yet. I think that would be a good time for that. So I'll try.
I'm with you. It'd be great to get a new voice onto the stage.
Wait a second. There's a lot of good conversation about finding documentation going on in the chat right now, and drivers to careers in COS or mainframes per se. And I think that I think that that's a good topic. If nobody wants to bring something up, is when we're on this conversation of, okay, yeah, we want people to get access to ZOS. I find myself wondering, what would I do with it? Like, I know what I'll do with a Raspberry Pi. I know what I'd do with a small Linux server. I know what I would do with a Windows VM or something like that, but I am completely puzzled, and I've been doing ZOS for a decade and a half now, as to what I would do with instance of ZOS. I'm not going to run my home automation on it. I'm not going to run I know someone has, but a Minecraft server on it, and we need to really understand what drives people. And I pull someone out of the audience. There's a hand up. Senthil, do you have a point you want to add in?
Maybe he's having trouble.
Okay, there we go. I see you now.
Okay. We did see green. There we go. Nothing. I think he's having communication problems there.
Okay.
I agree with you, Steve. I think one of the things I think AI could do is bring a little bit more cohesiveness to searching for things like messages. If IBM were to provide something that is smarter on connecting things, because I would think that all of us who've done any system programming has been in the situation that Bear was mentioning. Well, I have a return code and a reason code, and where the heck do I have to look? And it's not in one manual. You're doing 2 or 3 different manuals to figure out what really happened, and having something to put them all together would be very nice.
What they need to do, Frank, is an syslog message itself, put a link. I just click on the link in the syslog and it takes me to the manual.
Yeah.
We had talked about that years ago, doing that.
VSC does that. You can do hit position to a message ID, hit PF9, and it takes you to basically what, the IBM documentation, which is still the same of, system programmer, contact IBM support. It's that kind of uselessness.
No, or the famous one, the internal error detected.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, internal error detected. Okay, thank you.
I do like the contact your system program. It's also
a lot of conversation in the chat around what people find is fun. I'm interested in what drew a lot of people into the mainframe. For me, it was about an opportunity to work in a bad economy, and maybe that's the driver right now. But I have talked to a lot of people that the problem I see with that strategy is that gets you a few years in, right? There's a bad economy perhaps right now. You might get into your career, you're doing your ZOS thing. 3 years down the road, the economy ain't looking that shabby anymore. So you decide, okay, yeah, this was fun. It got me a paycheck, and it was a relatively reliable mechanism for getting a paycheck. But it's time for me to move on to something I actually find enjoyable. I think we need to focus on the enjoyable bit, because fortunately for me, I did the same thing. The economy was poor back in 2008. I got into it for a few years, and the next thing you know, by the time the economy shaped up, I started to enjoy what I was doing, and it was because I had some contribution to add to the table. I was able to do the Unix system services side of the system where nobody else could. And that's kind of where I started building bridges between generations, and that was great. So I'm going to stop speaking, and we are down to 2 minutes now. So let's see. And it seems like a lot of people are resonating with that story, and I appreciate that. Thank y'all. Any final thoughts, feelings from anybody?
Well, one of the things, just circling back to, the talk about the messages. One thing for simplification is we have to really work on self-healing rather give me a message, that tells you do this, just do it. If it says the yes,
We lost
well,
your Mike.
if it knows that this is what you should do, why doesn't it just do it? Self-heal. Don't make me have
Jez
to even
2
look
is
at the
going
message.
there. Jez 2 is working on that very well.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought the topic of simplification overall was a great topic to start with and lead with today, Frank. I want to thank you for that in itself. Where I see this moving is that we need to move to a world where IBM and vendors need to continue to improve their installation and maintenance processes, simplifying them continually, making it easier for those installing and maintaining software to approach it more akin to what you're seeing in an X platform than on a Z platform. I think that the further we can take that simplification process, and I know it's a complex environment. We're not here to talk about that. It's just that through AI, through technology, we have opportunities to further simplify this. But I don't want to have the last word, so I'll shoot it back over to Steven or Frank.
I think you're unfortunately the one with the last word, unless Frank wants to dial something in. I just heard a cool noise. What I did want to say is this is a great conversation. The chat is going wild here. We'd love for y'all to take this conversation to a different part of the Discord. Thank you for joining us today. It is now 9 o'clock in what Frank calls real time here in the central United States, but real time is now apparently 10 o'clock, Frank? Because that's where you are. So we're super grateful for y'all to be here. Thank you to everybody who came up on stage and had the opportunity to speak. Very grateful for the people who are new, who decided to take a chance and say something out loud. Your opinion matters quite a bit as well. And thankful to all the people who have a legacy with the system who had joined. Please, we're going to schedule another one of these, I think, maybe in a couple weeks. Love to see you here. The recording for this, I'll post it somewhere publicly if there's something that you want to read or comment on, and maybe other people can ask questions to pose topics next time around. But again, thank y'all for being here so much. I'm going to end the stage, but I'll see you in some of the other channels in the meanwhile. So this will probably close out for everybody. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch y'all later.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed that amazing discussion from the System Z Enthusiast Discord community. We'd love for you to check out what we got going on at 7 Nines. We got t-shirts, we got posters, we got stickers, we got everything you've ever want. Run over to 7nines.com to get yours today. Get subscribed to the channel and check us out at the System Z Enthusiast Discord community from the link in the description below. Have a great one. Thanks for listening.